Hello YouTube, this is Annihilation, and I have airbrushed things. Red for the Wraith Knight, as you saw in my previous video. This now has quite a few coats on it, to be honest. The Citadel Mephiston Red Air Range paint is not bad. It's just that it goes on super thin layers, and it requires several coats to get it to any sort of reasonable coverage. I went through a pot of this easily, being very careful not to waste that much of it, trying to do just the main body sections of the Wraith Knight, not the weapons, not the shields, not anything else. Luckily, I was prepared for that eventuality. I had more. But we should talk a little bit about the mistakes I made. As you know, this is meant to be more or less educational channel in terms of me making mistakes so you don't have to. Basically, what I thought I was doing was doing some color/airbrush testing. I really didn't think I did that much of it, which means that although I had a face mask, I did not, as you can see, doors closed around me, do it in a well-ventilated area. I did eventually open up, the doors were open, and I opened up the windows and doors to the balcony. However, the amount of red paint dust and the distance that traveled in my apartment was staggering, to be frank. I think some of it may have made it outside, and quite a lot of it made it onto the floor. It's not visible, but if you're walking around with white socks on, as I were, your socks will be pink on the bottom. Obviously, that's no bueno for you and pets and anyone else. So don't do that. To that end, and I can't show you because it's kind of big and heavy and I haven't unpacked it yet, but I bought a spray booth with a fan system that hooks up to the window. So I will be doing my airbrushing over there on the dining table with the spray booth and the thing out the window. And hopefully that will work. I will then do a perimeter check with some damp white cloth to see if any of it is escaping anyway, and if that is the case, I have to seriously rethink my airbrushing setup. In addition to the Wraith Knight, ooh, hang on, something just fell off. Oh no, that's something else. Okay. This is the current state of my Swarm Lord, yes. Flyer and Swarm Lord sort of kit bash. The black is base coat Abaddon black applied with a brush, which is the Carapace base coat. The wings and his undercoat are the airbrushed green, and then as you can see in the wing membranes, I've done some light sort of coating with a lighter green, which I have cleaned away. Don't know what it is. This was really fun. This is really easy. I'm not done with this because my airbrush connection hose is still leaking air, which means I haven't gotten back into it, plus the cleanup problem. But I'm going to pan down and show you progress. That is progress of a sort. That is more or less all the body pieces except the hands and the veins that go on the back. Some other things that are worth mentioning. I had a go at piecing this torso to the connector piece to the legs, which is in between these two. I don't know if you can see that. In between those two pieces, there's a connector piece. When you do that, the paint almost immediately comes off. The way the airbrush applies paint to these models leaves them highly vulnerable to the paint stripping off, getting scratched off. So it will require some sort of varnish. Now, if you go online and you look up varnishes, there's brush-on varnishes, there's spray-on varnishes, although I am mildly uncomfortable with the idea of putting a varnish through my airbrush because I think it'll be quite thick. I'm worried about cleaning it, although I have a boatload of cleaning supplies for my airbrush. But that has to happen, and people will tell you this in professional tutorials, that has to happen before decals go on. This thing did come with decals. I'm not sure if I'm going to use them. I've never been a huge fan of decals. I find them finicky and a bit boring. The alternative, however, is having to freehand stuff, which is slightly more daunting, especially if you are uncomfortable painting at a very small, detailed level. But that is the state of progress. One more thing I did is I drilled out the barrel. It's never going to show you these. I drilled out the barrels on these intercessors. Will you focus here? Will you do that for me? Can you ignore my face, camera? Can you focus on the intercessor marine? No, you cannot, because you are a terrible camera. If you're thinking about buying a Logitech camera, I can tell you right now, don't. Anyway, I drilled out the barrels of my marines. For that purpose, I bought something very cheap. I didn't buy a power drill. I didn't buy anything super fancy. I bought, if I can find it, here we go, this tiny thing. Now, in my hardware store, my local hardware store, they have just a ton of these. This is a 1mm Mitsubishi drill. It comes like this. Presumably the drills can be replaced, but basically they have these in every size you can imagine. There are multi-tools where you can switch them out, which are obviously more expensive. This was almost free, is how I would describe it. Like, this was as inexpensive as they come. You may want a bigger one than 1mm. I think 1mm is about right if you look at the bolter and the fact that it's shooting, well, frankly, mini rockets. You don't need it to be much bigger than this. If, however, you want to be true to the artwork and you want to drill out the side holes of the barrel, where the basically they're recoil compensators, where some of the gases go out the side. If you want to drill those out, you might want 2 different diameters for, I don't know, aesthetics. But this is super easy. To get a centered hole in your barrel, you're going to want to take something like a paperclip and make a little groove, or not groove, but make a little indentation exactly in the middle of the barrel before you stick this in, because as you're turning it, it has a tendency to turn off center, and then you have an off-center barrel, which of course is, well, not what you want. So there is that as well. And the last bit of progress I'm happy to show you is this is the oval base that the Wraith Knight came with. By the way, copyright 2006, so good job Games Workshop on continuing that line. I have used some corkboard. This is, I think, 3mm corkboard. I've stacked it into this basic, what would you call that? Like shore, and then some sort of, it's not going to be water, but some sort of liquid running through the center. And then the pose of the Wraith Knight is this very sort of dynamic, wide stance, and it's a very tall model. So, and I won't be playing it on tabletop, so it doesn't matter that these cork edges bleed over the base. They would, obviously, if you're going to play on the tabletop. And that's going to be my base, obviously unprimed, unsure about the colors, plants, whatever else I'm going to add. Tempting to add, obviously, Dead Space Marines. Although that's heretical, so maybe I'll figure something else out, an orc or something. But that's my progress. Progress has been, to be quite frank, slow. This is me in my work clothes without my tie and jacket, but basically I am working a lot, which means I don't get to do this as much as I like. Like I said, the airbrush is still leaking, which means I don't get to airbrush at the moment. There is no obvious fix. The internet, there are many airbrush sort of problems that the internet is happy to fix. Mine doesn't seem to be one of them. If the air was coming out the top of the hose, there would be a sealing problem, but that doesn't appear to be the case. My air is coming out of the bottom of the hose. I think it has to do with the size of the O-ring in the connector of the hose itself, connecting to the bottom of this airbrush. I don't think the O-ring is making a complete seal, which means the air goes out the bottom. If you or somebody you know has had that problem, or you know of a YouTube channel which is succinct in sort of troubleshooting that, I would be super glad if you post that in the comments, or contact me directly. My contact information is in my profile. And other than that, I'm not sure if I showed you this, YouTube, but this is a Citadel scenery brush, which I bought to keep the dust off my models. And is otherwise great for makeup if you're into that. I'm not, but that is my progress in the last couple of days / week. Like I said, I've been busy. I will say this, the additional weaponry that I may not use for the Wraith Knight. I did prime it. I would like to magnetize it, but it's my first big model, and since I'm not going to use it on the tabletop, there's no real point. So I may or may not do that depending on if I want to challenge myself and if I can find tiny magnets, which they didn't have them here. Further progress videos will go up eventually. Initially I promised them weekly. That is still my goal in the long run. That is not currently tenable with my work schedule and my airbrush situation. But when those things work themselves out, which they will, I will take you along for some. I will take this camera over there and we will do some airbrushing in the spray booth. And I will also do some hand painting on some of the other models and maybe even this thing. When all of that is done, or at least working correctly and I'm comfortable with my airbrush, we will go back to the Scorpion Mark II Super Heavy Grav Tank. And we will do some of that. I imagine the amount of paint I needed for this Wraith Knight will require me to buy some more paint for that tank. But that is all to come. So there's things to look forward to. I appreciate you very much. I appreciate you watching me and or listening to me. We will continue to upload these videos for your benefit. So remember, don't spray paint your house without a well-ventilated area and or a spray booth. Clean your floors afterwards. Can get soaked up by your pet's little paws. And you don't want your loved ones to, die of cadmium poisoning or something like that. I don't know what's in these paints. And other than that, I hope you are enjoying your own hobby adventures, and see you next time. Thank you very much.